I'd like to welcome Joe Rhodes. He is with CivicLens. He's the principal and developer of CivicLens and will be presenting to us about the backup utility for ArcGIS Online and Portal. So without any further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Joe. Thank you very much for doing this for us.
All right, you're welcome, Keith, and thank you for that generous introduction. Hello, everybody. Really appreciate you joining me. I'm honored for you to give me your time for me to show you our product that we think solves a fairly universal problem, which is the sort of the permanence of the hosted environment actions that you take in ArcGIS Online and to a degree in Portal. Are essentially permanent. In the case of Portal, you have things like WebGIS DR and server backups and other ways to get things back. But at the item level, you don't really. So we saw as, this has been in the ArcGIS marketplace since 2020. We started developing it in 2019. As Keith mentioned, we've got a little over 300 customers. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service uses it, State of Florida, Jane Goodall Institute. So we've got several high-profile customers that back up their AGOL or Portal environments with our tool. You can, as most of you probably know, there are other ways to back things up out of AGOL and Portal. You can go through Pro and export your feature services. You can copy things out of ArcGIS Assistant. You can make your own homegrown Python script. But what we sought to do with this product was remove a lot of that friction. So you don't need a Python environment. You could run this on your grandma's computer as long as it's a Windows machine. So it has everything. It's standalone, fully self-contained, has everything you need to back up your hosted items. So with that, I'm going to run through. I'm going to fire off a backup. I'm going to show you what the output of the backup utility looks like, and then we'll touch briefly on what you can do with your backups, how you can put your items back, how they were, the restoration processes. So I assume everyone can see the application here. So I'm just going to do a real quick overview. So just to show you how easy this is, you enter your URL. So again, that can be AGOL or Portal. You browse, you provide a save directory where you want to store your backups. We do have options to send your backups to Azure Blob Storage or an S3 bucket or Box or Dropbox or Google Drive. And then anything else that you can link to a Windows directory and sync, like OneDrive, for example, you can send your backups there as well. But today we're just going to do a local backup. You provide your username and your password. If you have username password, so your credentials are from the built-in identity store, then you're good to go. Just punch your password in and we're off. But I'm also going to show you if you've got multi-factor authentication enabled, or you have SSO only logins, like you log in through Okta or Azure AD or Entra or something like that. We have an option for you to authenticate through the OAuth 2 workflow into ArcGIS Online. So that's what I'm going to do for this demo. So we're going to go ahead and start. We've left our password blank so that we can use that three-legged OAuth flow. We're just going to go start. And it's going to ask us for a client ID. So we've registered an application in ArcGIS Online. This is all in the user guide. It only takes about 5 minutes to do. We're just going to grab that client ID. And we're going to pop that in here. And that's going to request permission. We allow it. And then we're just going to copy this code back over to the backup utility, and we're going to let it authenticate. And the backup utility will handle token exchange. So it grabs that access token and a refresh token. So even if your backups run for several hours, which they could if you have a large portal, because it does take time to create replicas on the back end. We're all GIS professionals here, so we understand. A lot of IT people that I work with don't understand that we're not just downloading items from the internet. We're actually requesting that ArcGIS Online or portal make a replica from that feature service, and then we're downloading that replica. So it can sometimes take several hours, but I say all that because we handle all the token exchange in the background to make sure that your authentication and authorization stays valid for the duration of the backup. So now the backup's running, we can come in and we can take a look at what the output looks like. So we've got our folder here. You can set a custom name in the settings. Here we just chose the default of backup. And here we've got folders for each item type as well as some logs. And then we have an inventory file that's being created here. This temp do not open. We'll see that name change shortly. If you like, you can sort your backups by owner, or you can do it by owner, folder, and item types. So if you're a heavy user of folders, and that's a better way to organize your backups, you can do it that way. So your feature services are backed up as file geodatabase. It's got all of your attachments, domains, related tables, everything you need is right there in a zipped file geodatabase. We also include the JSON definitions for your feature services. So that's going to hold your symbology, your default pop-up configurations, that sort of thing, an area of interest. If you've set that on the item visualization tab, will come through in those definitions. Your Survey 123 forms, those get backed up with the same format that you would see in Survey 123 Connect. So if you ever happen to delete a form, you've got everything that you need to put those back. Web maps come through as JSON if they happen to have any item resources, like you've got embedded images, that sort of thing, a media layer. Those will come in here as well. Web experiences, so your experience builder apps, you're going to have your JSON configuration file. And then again, your item resources come through. So any images, icons, logos, that sort of thing that you've embedded into your experience are going to come through on the backup as well. Everything else comes through. Story maps are similar to web experiences. Your notebooks come through with all of your Python code if you happen to use notebooks. And everything else comes through in its native formats. If you have PDFs or images or Microsoft Word or shape files or file geodatabases, that sort of thing in your portal, those are going to come through in their own native format. So what I'd like to do now is just run through a quick web map restoration workflow, and we have a full restoration guide. We're working with a Dutch partner on automation for some of this, but for the time being, the restoration is kind of done in a more surgical manner using ArcGIS Assistant. So we're going to run through that workflow. But before I hop into that, I think it's probably a good time to stop and see if there are any questions.
If folks have a question, feel free to unmute yourself or pop that into the chat line. While we're waiting for others to post, I have a question for you, Joe.
Sure.
In my ArcGIS Online account, I have created a couple of different folders, for different projects over the year, big projects, big studies. If I wanted to just download that folder with all the different maps and so on and so forth in it, can I do that?
That is a great question, and I will show you the answer to that here. So we'll just open up actually, let me just open up another instance here. Just 1 second. Okay, so we'll let this open, and then I will show you. Actually, you know what I can do? I can interrupt this backup because we've got enough to work off of. So we have a backup filters tab where you can, so there are various ways to define your backup. One of them is you can do a differential backup. So if you only want to get items edited at the past set number of days, you can do that here. What a lot of our customers do, so you can schedule your backups. That's a question that we often get asked. You can schedule your backups. What a lot of customers will do is they'll do a daily differential and just get items from the past day. And then every month or every couple of months, they'll run a full backup just to cover all their bases. So that's one way to define your backup. You can also define it by tags. You can exclude by tag. If you have items that you know you don't want to back up, you can do that. You can specify an owner. You can exclude certain item types as well. And here we have an option where you can choose whether to get your cache tile layers or not, or just get feature services if you're only interested in the data. But to Keith's question, we've got the group folder backup here. And you can specify a folder name here. So just note that folder names are tied to a user. So, if you're an admin and you're looking to back up a folder with a name that might go across multiple users, it will grab the items from those multiple users. But if you're just backing up your own items and you've got a unique folder name, you can just pop it in here and you can actually do multiple folders as well. Same thing with groups. You can put the items in a group and define your backup that way. Does that answer your question, Keith?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, you bet.
Yeah.
And then before I hop into the restoration, I just want to run over one other thing real quick. One of the advantages of our application over perhaps a homegrown Python script, in addition to being thorough, and we work with all different customers and get feedback, so we're kind of doing all the maintenance for you, and you offload that effort of maintaining your own environment. But it's also multi-threaded, so it defaults to 15 threads. But what this does is it means that when you're waiting on ArcGIS Online or Portal to do its work to get an item ready for you to download, especially making replicas, the process doesn't have to wait for that to finish. It puts that off onto its own thread and continues working on the other items. So if you've got a 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15,000 item portal, this becomes really important for keeping the backup time down. We do have one customer that has over 1 terabyte of data in ArcGIS Online, and their backups take 3 days if they do a full backup. So it becomes really important when your portal starts to grow. I also just want to point out real quick, I don't know why AGOL doesn't do this by default, turn on delete protection. I think it should, but you can also choose to delete protect all of the items so that, that checkbox, keep this item from being accidentally deleted. This just turns that on for every item that's included in your backup.
Another question came in, Joe,
Sure.
in the chat line, and that is this utility something that could be added into a Windows task scheduler so that maybe it kicks off at midnight at night, and by the time people come back into work, it is done?
Yes, and in fact, that's how most of our customers do it. So what we're looking at here, this obviously has a GUI, you enter all your information in, that's great. The scheduled version is identical on the back end, but rather than having a GUI to enter this information in, you just provided a config file, and then you can point Task Scheduler to it. We've got a step-by-step in the user guide that tells you how to set that up, but that is what most organizations do. They'll just fire off their backup at 8 o'clock at night after everybody's gone home, and then you also get a confirmation email that lets you know if any items failed to back up or if your backup was successful. So you don't have to go in and check it. You just wait for that email to come in. All right. So now we'll hop in to sort of a quick restoration workflow, just in case anyone hasn't worked in ArcGIS Assistant. I use it probably 4 or 5 times a day just for, various workflows when I need to get into the JSON of an item or update an item resource, that sort of thing. It's I would definitely advise anyone and everyone to get familiar with this tool if they're not already, because it's extremely handy. But what we're going to do is we're just going to mess up a web map, and then we're going to restore that web map to show you how this works. So let's go. Let's sort these by name. Okay. So we've got I know this map isn't being used right now, so I can go ahead and mess with it. So we've got elements right away. So this is for elements. It's a third-party asset management system, and this is for their right-of-way assets. It's also worth pointing out that the original item ID gets appended here to the backup name. So that helps you link everything together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our meeting here. And let's say we're going to remove a couple of layers that we wanted, and they've got, they've got arcade expressions on them. Maybe they've got custom pop-ups. They've got labeling, all this stuff that we've done, all this work that we've done. And now we've removed them from the web map, and we've saved that web map, and now all of that's blown out. So what are we going to do? Well, we have a backup. So what we can do is that we can go here into ArcGIS Assistant. We're going to find that map, and then just view item JSON and over to our data tab. And then we're going to grab our JSON from the backup, and you can just open it in any text editor. My default happens to be VS Code, but it could just be Notepad. And then we're just going to do a Control-A, Control-C, back over here to our data, Control-A, Control-V. Oops, you have to click Edit JSON first. Control-V. And then we're going to save it, and when we do, it formats it for us real pretty. And then we can come back into our web map here, and we'll refresh. And those layers that we deleted have now been restored. So everything's been restored to the state of the web map at the time the backup was taken. So in the case of your data, your feature services, you could do a truncate append, you could do an overwrite, you could publish fresh and then just swap out your item IDs and your web map JSON. There's a few different ways. And like I said, we have a whole guide that walks you through that. We also provide support for item restoration while you have an active license. So with that, that's the extent of the demo. It's very simple conceptually. It's fairly complex, and it's extremely complex on the back end. But the concept is simple. It just allows you to export your hosted environment to a location that you control and be able to recover from deleted items, or if somebody goes in and does a bad field calculation in Pro against a hosted feature layer, or they forget they had half the features selected from your address points, and they save that through Pro. Just gives you a way to get back home when things like that happen. And with that, I'll take any other questions that you might have. Go ahead and start another backup here while that